Hello once again. This is our second topic for this course, and this time we are going to talk about the nature of the state. Where did it come from? How did it start? What is the composition of the state? So those are some of the topics that we are going to talk about, and hopefully at the end of the session, you should be able to explain the definition and elements of the state. What are the four important elements that make up a state? Discuss the essential characteristics of sovereignty and explain how states may have originated, and of course, distinguishing states from nations. So the discussion will be divided into three parts. The first one talking of the elements of the state, and the second part will talk about the essential characteristics of sovereignty, and the third part will talk about the theory of the creation of the state, including the differences, the comparison between the states and nations. Okay, so let us start. As I was browsing through and I was reviewing the topic, I just glossed over the largest country by population. But this one is an old list, but you would guess 2016, I think. Now, largest country by population would be the 11th would be Mexico there. What do you think would be the 10th? It would be Japan is included here. And then we have Russia, ninth. And then eighth would be Bangladesh. The seventh, the seventh one is okay, this one is moving slow. The seventh one is Nigeria. The sixth is Pakistan. Fifth, we have Brazil. Fourth, Indonesia. The second, uh, yeah, that's the fourth rather. The third is USA. And then the first two would be dominated by Asians. You would have India, number two, and the largest country by population, that would be China. And where is Philippines there? Ang 12 tayo, unfortunately. Now, this is one of the things that we should not be happy why we are placed on the 12th, no, and we should not be so competitive as well. Anyway, let us now review the definition of the state. Okay, we have already discussed that very briefly in the first topic that we've had, but let me go back to this one, to the definition, because this is now what we're going to talk about. The definition of a state goes like this, and hopefully you will be able to memorize it. It's a community of persons more or less numerous, permanently occupying a definite portion of territory, possessing an organized government to which the great body of the inhabitants render habitual obedience and free or nearly so from external control. Under the international law, the definition for statehood under the Montevideo Convention on the Rights and Duties of the State um, claims that these are the following elements of the state, meaning to say that they have all of these four should be present. Otherwise, if they are not present, then they will not be considered as a state. So there has to be a permanent population, a defined territory, a government to which inhabitants render habitual obedience, and the fourth one is the capacity to enter into relations with other states. However, this Montevideo Convention was also, although part of it was lifted or was adopted by the modern definition of the state, they have streamlined it. So this now would be the elements of the state. Okay, I have already highlighted it. You have the persons, you have the territory, and an organized government. And then we have, it is not clearly stated there, but when we're talking of the habitual obedience given to the government and the freedom from external control, what we're talking about here is sovereignty. Okay, so basically the elements of the state are four: people, territory, sovereignty, and government. And you have to understand that for all these four, even if, say, you have territory, sovereignty, government, but if people is missing, then you still do not have a state. If territory is missing, and you have people, sovereignty, government, still it will not be a state. The same way with sovereignty and government. So what I'm saying here is, if one of them is missing, we cannot have a state. All of these four should be present in order for an entity, in order for a place, to become a state. Okay, and why is it important for a country to be a state? So please take note here that I am now using country as opposed to the state, because a state is a political term, whereas a country can be just any place where you have people. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to have independence from others. So why is it important to have a state? Because if you are a state, the citizens of a state will now have rights that will be recognized all over the world. And the state can vote for international issues. That's the independence of the state, and the state cannot just be taken over by any other state. So that's the presumption there. See, other places that are not considered as a state, the people who live there do not have their passport. Why? Because uh, who will grant them their passport, since their government, presuming that they have a government, do not have the capacity to grant them that according to the international arena. Okay, so they cannot just go from one country to another. What they only have would be the right, the paper for them to travel, but they are not protected. They are not as protected if as opposed to the citizen who belongs to a state. That is why these places, especially those who are longing for their independence, to part ways from their colonizers, they want to be recognized as a state so that they can rule their own place. So that's one of the problems with Taiwan, with Hong Kong, with, well, a lot of the places that is taken hold of by China, and then you also have uh, Guam. These are the places that want their independence, but they cannot have that independence because they are still under the hold of their modern colonizers. Okay, so all these should be present. Now let us look at them one by one. The first one is people. Of course, it's very important for a state to have a people. Otherwise, there is nobody to work and to run the government, to have the economy. So people are very important. These are the mass of population living within the state. How many are we talking about here? It should neither be too small nor too large, but small enough to be self-governed, at least, no, yung kayang i-control pa rin, hindi yung masyadong madami na chaotic na, and large enough to be self-sufficing. Wag naman masyadong konti na hindi niya kayang proteksyonan yung kanyang bansa. Na it should be large enough in order for it to create an independent nation. Isa that would be for the people. So large or small, every state must be inhabited. That is to have a population. So hindi pa pwedeng walang nakatira doon sa lugar na yon. So in the case of the Philippine population, as of now December 14, we have 110 million so okay, for that. So dati predict na hanggang 110 flat lang tayo, kaso ayan, nag-exceed tayo. Anyway, uh, we are doing something about it. And next now, we have the territory. The territory, the place that is inhabited by the people. This is the geographical domain of the state. Okay, and the geographical domain is divided into four parts. You have the terrestrial, talking of land. Kaya kapag sinabing extraterrestrial, we are talking here of beyond the land, at least beyond the earth. Ito yung mga aliens na, yung mga ET. Yan. Fluvial is the term fluvial pertains to internal waters. What are the internal waters? You have the waterfalls, lake, river, and maritime. You now have the external waters. What are the external waters? They are usually beyond the boundary, the territory, or at least portion nila is just part of the territory of that state. So part of this would be the oceans, the seas. You have the West Philippine Sea, external water yan. Kasi beyond na siya dun sa land area natin, pero meron pa rin tayong pagmamayari, katulad nga ng Scarborough Shoal na inaagaw sa atin. And then we also have the aerial um, domain. We have the airspace above the other domains. Now here, hindi ibig sabihin that whatever it is that that when we look up, the things that we are seeing above us is already part of our territory. It's not like that. There is a certain air limit or space limit that will only be ours. So what happens then? If an airplane or an aircraft is flying over our territory, it should not go below that airspace. Otherwise, it is trespassing, and if we are enemies with the owner of that aircraft, then we can shoot it down. But if we are friends with that, we may allow that aircraft to pass through our air territory so that it will have a better traveling time. So that is how it is when it comes to the airspace. So we will talk more of this when we concentrate on the national territory that is found in Article 1 when we go to our territory, when we go to the discussion of the Constitution. And what else can I say about the territory? So every state must have land with known and recognized borders. So they should also be recognized. These borders should also be recognized by the other states. Next, we have the government. I hope that you recognize this. This is where supposedly the president of the Philippines lives. That is in Manila. Okay, so what is a government now? The agency or instrumentality to which the will of the state is expressed, formulated, or carried out, usually named after the name of the country. So the government is the go-between between the people and the state. So the people will signify its interest, whatever it is that it wants, and then the government will be almost the representation of the state. Although the people is also the representation of the state. But since the state is an abstract idea, it will now be, the agent now of the state becomes the government. So at the same time, the government is also the agent of the people. So that's a crucial role that is played by the government. It has to balance the right or the interest of the state and also the interest of the people. So it cannot give undue or unlimited freedom to the people, because the unlimited freedom of the people might ruin the state. It cannot also give unlimited freedom to the state because it might create an abusive atmosphere to the people. So dapat balance. It has to balance how much right, how much power is supposed to be given to the state as opposed to the people. You see, if you have an authoritarian or communist state, then the leaning of the right or the power goes to the state. But if you have a democratic society, then the leaning of power goes a little bit or tilt towards the people. So that's the stand of the government. So usually named after the name of the country, you have the Philippine government and U.S. government as well. So the government is the mechanism through which a state makes and enforces its policies. This we should also differentiate it with the administration. When we talk about the administration, they are the people. So the government is the entity, the instrumentality, but the people who run the government, we call that the administration. They are the people who manage the affairs of the government, usually named after the chief executive. So example of that would be Aquino administration, Ramos administration, and right now we have the Duterte administration. Okay, so who knows? One of you later on will become that administration, and I hope that when you do have that chance, you will make Philippines a much better place than what where it is now. Okay, next we have sovereignty. Now, let me just emphasize the spelling of sovereignty here, because a lot of people, Filipino problem, ano, we want to put syllables in all these things. Parang hindi tayo nausuhan ng silent letters. So, place, naglalagay sila ng I dito sa gitna na ito, sovereignty. So, walang I dyan ha. So, it's only sovereignty. Okay? Now, what is sovereignty? The sovereignty is the supreme power of the state to command and enforce popular obedience within its jurisdiction and freedom from external control. There are two aspects to sovereignty. The first one is internal, and the second one is external. In the case of internal, it has it has the power, it has the ability to control the movement of the people so that the state will still be protected. It has the power to enforce popular obedience and to rule within the territory. How does the state do that? Through the law enforced, executed by the three branches of the government. You have the judiciary, you have the legislative, and you also have the executive. So they are now making sure that the people will behave, and the people are supposed to follow them as well. But at the same time, it also must have an external power, the freedom from external control. This is the power of the state to govern its constituents independently of the other states. So sometimes it is also termed as independence. But please take note that independence refers to the external aspect of sovereignty. So what does it mean? It means that whatever it is that you do inside your territory, for as long as it is within the legal bounds of humanity, of what is good for humanity, then you can do anything about it. But in some cases, the international community will meddle into the internal affairs of the country, because they might deem that it is not in keeping anymore with how people are supposed to live, and therefore the international community feels that it is their duty to save these people from the abuses that the government might be enforcing to its people. That's what happens. That's what happened in the case of this African country. I forgot about it. And this country was recruiting kids, or that they have practices that is not in keeping with the human rights, like FGM. You have the female genital mutilation. There is a call now. There's an international clamor to stop that kind of practice. The child bride as well, and honoring. So there is, even though they are supposed to have freedom within their country because that's part of their tradition. But if it is hurting people so much and the people are helpless to change that, international community will step in. That's also what happened in the case of the extrajudicial killing that is being investigated, or at least they propose to investigate it. Okay, because the international community feels that it should not be within the power of the government or the administration anymore to do that, because it's making life trivial. Parang hindi importante ang buhay kapag kaganon. So there's no problem if they are killed according to the law, but if they are killed beyond the law, which is what happens when there is an extrajudicial killing, then the international community or United Nations, kung minsan, now would want to step in. So that is the sovereignty. So, meaning to say that, again, that the state has absolute power within its territory. It can decide its own foreign and domestic policies. So to summarize this, we have four elements of the state. For a state to become a state, it must have people, it must have territory, it must have government, and it must have sovereignty. And once you are done, we can now apply to the United Nations, and the United Nations will have its seal of approval, and then we are considered as a state. Okay, so that's it for the first part. I'll see you on the second part.